Hello, my name is Abraham Hanusius. This is going to be a presentation on obesity and how stress is a factor in obesity as part of a summer psychology course at Brown University. So obesity, in a nutshell, it's a state of being where a person has excess body fat, and it's commonly determined by the BMI index, which simply measures weight in relation to your height. Now, I personally don't think that's the best metric, simply because body weight is not necessarily the best determiner of body fat. So, like an example of that is, I had a PE coach who was clinically obese, but like he could do 30 pull-ups and had a six-pack. So, obviously, in his case, his body weight was due to a lot of muscle, not fat. So, obesity causes a lot of health issues with your heart, with your brain, with your bones, like hypertension, cardiovascular disease, higher risk for cancer, stuff like that. And the most straightforward cause of obesity is simply eating more calories than is used by your body for extended periods of time. But there are many complex factors that can influence this balance between the calories consumed and calories expended by the body. So these are some of the complex factors that can influence the delicate balance of calories consumed and calories expended. So physical activity determines how many calories you can burn that are necessarily in your control. So you can't really influence how many calories it's going to take to digest food or how many calories you're going to burn while you sleep, but you can take walks and exercise to increase the amount of calories being burnt. There's also various medical related factors, especially in regards to hormones. So genetically speaking, for example, your brain can be more sensitive to leptin. So leptin is a hormone secreted by fat cells, basically tells your brain when fat storage is low, basically it's telling you to eat. So if you're more leptin sensitive, you can have a greater appetite, which obviously influences the amount of calories you can consume. There's also Cushing's syndrome, which causes chronically high stress in patients, and as a result, people who suffer from Cushing's syndrome end up also suffering from obesity more common and more severely. So we're going to talk about stress later on in the presentation, but for now, just know that Cushing's syndrome, for example, can influence obesity due to no fault of the person. There's also personal situation. So, for example, if you're well off, you can purchase access to better food, better exercise facilities, better medicine, better dietitians, nutritionists. You're able to essentially buy your way out of issues. So obviously, if you're poor, you're not afforded that luxury. There's also cultural and societal factors. So maybe your community just doesn't have access to parks and trails, or maybe you live in a consumer society such as America, where you have all these advertisements just blaring at you saying, "Oh, look at all this food! It's so good. It looks so colorful." But so these can influence a person to say, "Oh, that Applebee deal looks really good. I'm gonna get a burger with endless fries or something like that." So these are all things that a person cannot necessarily control, but they all do play a factor. So when you're experiencing something stressful, your body releases ACTH and CRH as part of the stress response. And part of the stress response is suppressing appetite, because when you're running from a lion, you're not really worried about what you're going to be eating. You don't really need to know what ACTH and CRH really means during this time, but just know that it triggers the release of cortisol. So the thing with ACTH and CRH is that they're secreted very fast, in a matter of seconds, and they can also be removed from your bloodstream very fast in a matter of seconds. So after a stressful situation is over, everything goes back down to a baseline, like you're breathing calm again, the sweat's evaporating like in just like a few minutes. ACTH and CRH trigger the release of cortisol, but that happens over a matter of hours, and as a result, cortisol also takes hours to be removed from the bloodstream. And the thing with cortisol is it's commonly viewed as the stress hormone, but the more interesting thing is that yes, it's part of the stress response, but cortisol is actually the hormone that sort of inhibits the production of itself and ACTH and CRH. So cortisol is actually part of the end sequence of a stress response. So cortisol triggers appetite, particularly in sugar and fat-rich foods, as a survival mechanism. So after you're stressed, you're not going to be wanting to touch the celery or the broccoli. You're going to be wanting to touch the Oreos, the French fries, So studies have shown that on average, people suffering from obesity also suffer higher cortisol levels as measured by the concentration of cortisol in their hair. But counterintuitively, not all people suffering from obesity have higher concentrations of cortisol. Obesity does not necessarily cause high stress. So researchers have found that even in kids, higher cortisol levels in their hair does correspond with higher BMI. And so having now established this connection, it's kind of clear that cortisol does play an extremely important role in obesity, and by targeting this, you can make as much of an impact on your body as making the other necessary steps to fight obesity, such as exercise and diet. Now, just looping back briefly, because ACTH and CRH release in a matter of seconds, right? Cortisol, it takes hours to get in and then takes hours to get out. So the problem with that is even after you're not stressed, even if it's just brief periods of stress over the course of a day, cortisol remains high. Cortisol levels in your body remain high, while ACTH and CRH remain low. Now the issue with that is it causes constant high appetite throughout the day for these aforementioned sugar and fat-rich foods. So it's part of why it's incredibly important to focus on reducing stress as a part of your regimen to fight obesity. So again, just a brief overview. Obesity is a simple input and output of calories, but there are many more complex factors at play than just food and exercise. And that making improvements to your mindset and your lifestyle can help fight obesity. And it can make as much of a difference as making positive choices about your diet and physical activity, and I personally recommend both. While a lot of people might be at a larger disadvantage from the get-go because of, say, genetics, or simply because of how they were raised, how their body's epigenetics have been coded throughout the years, not necessarily within their control, obviously. Even just improving your mindset, it seems like a really minor thing, but it really does improve your body's response. When you're not constantly stressed throughout the day, when you're focusing on the effort and not the result, when you're not stressing about the weight on the scale, you're able to reap more benefits from what you're doing, and you're able to more successfully fight obesity. So these are some of my references. Yeah, thank you for listening to my presentation, and have a good day.